this episode of the Highway 62 podcast, I'm going to talk to Antoinette Godin. She is an author. Her first novel just came out. It's called Native Brushstrokes. She is a UCLA law grad, and she is an enrolled member of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe, and she's practiced tribal law for 30 years. The novel's really, really good so far, and she explains it as Wuthering Heights meets Indian country. Really interesting interview coming up. Stay tuned. All right, Antoinette Godin, thank you for joining me here on the Highway 62 podcast. How are you today?
Thank you so much. And I am doing wonderfully. And I'm so excited to be invited to be on this podcast. I wanted to share with you, I'm coming down that way. I'm going to be at
Yeah.
the 29 Palms Book Fair. So I can't wait. It's going to be
Yeah,
so much.
so the 29 Palms Book Festival is November 7th, 8th, and 9th. And that's why we wanted to get this interview going as quickly as we could. You are going to be there Friday the 7th at 11 a.m. So
That's correct. Yes.
if you're going to be out here, and if you're not planning on coming out here for that weekend, and you're in the greater LA area or whereabouts, it's an awesome event, and I highly recommend people come on out. The weather will be amazing at that time. It's gotten unbelievable out here over the last week, so I highly recommend that. But your new book, and it's your first novel, is called Native Brushstrokes, and I loved this little quote of yours describing the book of it's Wuthering Heights meets Indian country. And maybe you could expand on that a little bit for us.
Well, what I mean by that is I'm a studied literature. I was a lawyer for, or have been a lawyer for the past 35 years. I also have studied literature, and I loved Wuthering Heights because it involved sort of a Byronic love story. It was a love triangle. It had a lot of drama. And what's amazing, it was Ms. Bronte's only novel, and it
Mm,
seemed to be a novel that became more popular after she passed away, which is amazing. It seems like that happens with a lot of artists. So it's a love triangle involving a Native American man who's a Plains tribal member. My main character, she's a tribal member too. And they're both meeting in this sort of twisted love triangle in Los Angeles at a buffalo feast in the middle of the 80s when a lot of exciting things were going on in Los Angeles at that time. It was
yeah,
a really exciting area.
yeah. And I just got a copy of the book just a day or two ago, so I just got into it a little bit, and we'll come back a little bit to the book. But as I mentioned, this is your first novel, but you are also a graduate of UCLA Law.
That's
And
correct.
you are
Hmm.
an enrolled member of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe. And
Yes.
and tell us a little bit about your experience, because you said you've been practicing law for decades. Is it primarily tribal law? And give us a little bit of background of what that entails.
Well, it has all been tribal law, and that was my dream. And that was when I went to UCLA, that was what I really wanted to do. And so I wanted to work for tribes and make a change in the world. And so it's been very, very exciting. I've worked with numerous tribes all over Washington state. I ended up moving up here to get into a little cooler weather, and there's like 27 tribes up here, so you really were busy. And
Gotcha.
it's been really exciting. I mean, I've read a lot of other books about Indian country, as they call it, and I thought, hey, why not write a book about what it's like as an urban Indian versus a reservation native? Because there are, so many urban Indians now. And Los
Mm,
Angeles was a menagerie of tribes, back in the 80s with the relocation program of the 60s. There were more urban Indians in Los Angeles than any other city in the United States.
Oh, interesting.
So it was really exciting. I mean, you would meet people from, imagine any tribe you can imagine, you would meet there. So it was very, just riveting. Everybody was coming out for, some people wanted to be actors, actresses, other people were trying to get careers going with the fashion industry. Just people wanted to get to the big city. So there was a lot of like intertribal stuff going on, lots of intertribal social activities. That
Yeah.
thing. It was very, very exciting.
When I first started reading the book, and you kind of touched on it there, Cordy, one of the main characters there is kind of an aspiring artist, starving artist, as so many, are when they first get going. And it's that early 1980s Los Angeles. And I'm a huge fan of anything historical Los Angeles. It's just, there's so many great books, and I'm reading a book right now about the coming together of, the making of one of my favorite movies, Chinatown. Freeway Topia is a great book about the freeway systems in LA. So I was interested, right away, just intrigued to get into it. But I also love, the weaving of the Native American characters. And you had mentioned that it's, kind of put together based on experiences, that the people in the stories you kind of put together based on people you met and experiences you had. And that was really, a time frame where the awareness of, mistreatment of Native Americans was kind of being brought more to the forefront. Talk a little bit about just what it was like and some of your experiences at that time.
Okay, so I did live in Santa Monica when there was rent control. So there were beach cottages there, and you're not going to believe this, but rent was like 400 a month or
Yeah,
300. Can you imagine that? And being
right. You
right by
just
the beach.
right.
And it was
Yeah,
very tropical, really cool, very kind of
sure.
before we had all of the modern stuff. There was no internet, there were no cell phones. Everybody did snail mail, you read the newspaper,
Yeah,
everybody socialized because you didn't have all the ability to do what we do now, like you and I speaking long distance.
sure.
You just didn't have that. So that made it very interesting because you had to have face-to-face contact with people. And was amazing about that, and this was pre all of the media and stalkers and whatnot, a lot of like Hollywood got involved with the Native community at that time with political movements. So what was exciting about it is, I'm going to say, the American Indian was sort of fashioned after the Black Panthers. So there were all of these different groups. There was a sympathy for these groups and what was happening, and everybody was idealistic, wanted to change the world, wanted to
Mhm.
really make things better for everybody. So that made it just really idealistic, sort of the age of Aquarius that sort of floated into the 80s, that view of we're going to fix the world, we're going to change it, we're going to, people are going to eat again, people can afford things. And so that was kind of the goal of a lot of these groups. So you had like the Mecha, which was the kind of the farm workers union, and people with Cesar Chavez in California fighting
Yeah,
for farm workers' rights. Black Panthers up in the Bay Area. You even had like the Italian Civil Rights League
yeah.
back east. So, I mean,
Joe
everybody was
Colombo. Yeah.
involved. Isn't that exciting? I mean, everybody was involved with that. And what was really exciting is people like Marlon Brando got really involved. And so if you went
Hmm.
to a march, he would be there speaking. He was real supportive. You got to meet a lot of people in like the Hollywood industry who were really supportive of Native rights. So, we get invited to Malibu. Max Gale had a teepee at his house. He did Barney Miller. I don't know if
Okay.
you remember him, but there
Oh,
were
heck
a lot
yeah.
of people that hang out there. Peter Fonda and Jane Fonda were really active.
Yeah.
I got to house sit next to Peter Fonda's house because they wanted me. It was just so much fun. And it was
Yeah.
also a riveting time, because we really, people really cared about what was happening. And I'm hoping we can come back to that today and kind of get back into that because it really was an idealistic time. I'm hoping we'll come back to that.
Yeah. Early in the novel, and I don't know if you mentioned this just a minute ago, talking about these different groups, but you talk a little bit about AIM. Was that
Yes.
American Indian Movement? Is that what that stood for?
Exactly, and there
Okay.
were very famous, and you may not know who they are, but Dennis Banks, who was a Minnesota Chippewa tribal member, Russell
Mm-hmm.
Means, who was Sioux from South Dakota, John Trudell, who had Res Dogs, that group, lived
Yeah.
in Venice, did a lot of like sort of rap and live performances before they were popular. This extremely poetic man that
Mm-hmm.
Robert Redford made a movie about. You had Leonard Peltier, people marched for him, and he's out of prison now. So that is like so exciting for Indian country that we didn't think he was ever going to get out.
Yeah.
And he's out. So it's been sort of a miracle. So you had all these iconic, really famous, well spoken people that were really into rights. And what's amazing to me is now they're all gone. I mean, none of them are alive anymore. So I think it's really important in my novel to sort of document that time because they're gone. And I wanted to write it so that we could kind of remember that period, and not forget it. And what was really exciting about that whole era is that a lot of the various leaders, example John Trudell, just unbelievably articulate speaker. I mean, I could watch him speak for hours and he could just mesmerize you. And they seem to be all of them very charismatic. People just loved listening to them. You almost went into a spell listening to them speak. And so I think that sort of helped like a lot of people get involved. They were very inspirational. And hopefully there are people like that again today. And I think with some of the rappers and performers there are, but it was like a very kind of iconic, exciting time period.
Yeah. I another thing I noticed, your visual description, again right away in the book, it really does bring you back. You talk about how popular it was for, people were wearing turquoise stuff and kind of taking on this whole sort of Western, but also Native American Indian influences into the fashion and things like that. And I thought you did a really great job of just like the book does kind of suck you into the time frame really quick.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. But yes, everybody was wearing like cowboy boots. I remember that was the style. Urban cowboy was out at
Yeah,
the
yeah.
time. So the whole cowboy look, like you were like, how do we have cowboys in Los Angeles? There were all kinds of guys running around with Stetsons and leather coats and Tony Lama boots. If you can imagine, it was super, and the
Oh, yeah.
country music was really great, along with all of the rock.
Sure.
I mean, the
Oh,
music
yeah. It was
was
an
just
amazing, yeah,
unbelievable.
amazing time. It made me think about it. And, aside from the gratuitous martial arts violence in these movies, but, let's see, I was in high school 80 through 85. And I think the first Billy Jack movie came out in 1971, and they did three or four others. And as I kind of thought about it, I kind of, and there may be others for sure, but to me, it was kind of one of the first mainstream films that talked about the mistreatment of Native Americans.
Exactly. And I love the Billy Jack movies, by the way. They were great, weren't they, though? Those were
I
some
loved
of
it.
my
I
favorites.
loved
Yeah,
it.
I watched all of those, like just
Yeah.
glued to the set. But yeah, I mean, Billy Jack sort of brought it to the forefront. I'll tell you who else was really involved was David Carradine.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Remember when
Sure.
he did Kung Fu,
Yeah.
and he got really involved with the Native American, movement and was very supportive. There were concerts that famous musicians would perform to help natives, Willie Nelson,
Hmm.
comedians, Robin Williams. I mean, it was just such an exciting time. Nowadays, there's so much fear about, I don't know, stalkers. And it was a different time. We were pretty
Sure.
innocent back then. Nobody thought of things like that back then. So, I mean, I just think about all the regions, that were so different too. Santa Monica was small town, if you can imagine,
Yeah. Yeah.
with all the cute little cottages and walking to the. Can you imagine that? It's
Oh God.
hard to picture that today,
I
isn't
yeah.
it?
Hey folks, Seth here from Cliffhanger Guides. Are you curious about rock climbing in Joshua National Park? Got kids who'd love an adventure out on the rocks? And hey, are you a Morongo Basin local? If so, we are stoked to offer you a 25 to 50% off guided rock climbing trip on non-peak season dates. Come climb, explore, and see your backyard in a whole new way. Head to cliffhangerguides.com, shoot us a message, and use promo code JTROCKS. Cliffhanger Guides, local roots and desert proud.
I know as much as I love Southern California. I love all of California. I'm a very pro California person. I was actually born in Chicago and raised out there, but I've been out here a long time. But I love, yeah, the older eras of Los Angeles. To me, starting like in the 1940s, and 50s, and I always think how amazing it would have been to be in, early Hollywood and LA at that time. Um, it, you know, as you were talking about this and some of the actors in the movies and stuff, one of the things though that still would have been happening at that time is people being cast in roles, to play, an Indian in a movie, and they weren't of Native American descent. And you mentioned it came up early in the book when Cordy's at the party and says the actor who played the "Don't Litter" commercial. That was so popular it shows the Native American man with the tear going down his face. And as I'm reading it, I said, is she going to mention that he was Italian? And then the next, couple of lines you did. And I was like, yeah, like that was still so common at that time to not cast, people, not, and certainly not just with Native American, we've gone through this with all different types of, ethnicities not being cast accurately.
Yes, that's so true. Yes, definitely. You're right on that. And I hope that, we reach a point now where we do that and we have real native actors and actresses because they're out there struggling, trying to get those parts. And, hopefully we'll start hot, they'll start casting real natives. But it was really sad because there were a lot of people with wigs on and putting on the
Yeah,
dark makeup, kind of like what you might call the blackface,
sure,
like an
sure.
El Jolson thing for natives, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
And there were real natives mixed in, peppered in, but from what I hear in the old days, some of the language, they'd use the wrong language for the wrong tribe, and nobody knew, and they were saying crazy stuff. So it was kind of funny. But
Yeah.
yeah, everybody wanted to be a famous star, a lot of
Yeah.
actors.
I feel like there's been some, Dark Winds on AMC is a wonderful TV show. And I feel, from the research I've done, it's cast really well, much more authentic. It's also kind of like 1970s, in the West. That's such a great show. And I watched an amazing documentary about Native American musicians and their impact in popular music and rock and roll, and that was also something I would recommend people get a chance to look at. Um, what inspired you to go from practicing law to writing this book?
Well, I was a journalism major once upon a time before I went into law, and I've always loved reading and writing. I grew up, reading. My family came from the boarding school era. My grandmother went, I've
Mm,
got sort of a really shocking family history, but my great grandmother went to Carlisle, the first boarding school in the United States in
okay.
Pennsylvania. And then my grandmother went to one of the Catholic mission boarding schools, and my mother went to one in Minnesota called Pipestone. And so I thought, one of the things that they did is they made sure kids could read and write. They would hammer
Mm-hmm.
it into you, even though the schools had a storied kind of abusive history. They were really strict about that. And so my grandmother, who wasn't well educated on the reservation, had this amazing library. She read all the classics. She was an avid reader, Charles Dickens, the Brontes. So I grew up reading too. And all of us, that was a weekend thing. We all popped books open and read. And so I loved literature so much. I thought, I love it. And one day I'm hoping I can write something because I love writing so much and reading so much. So it was a dream of mine. And now that I'm heading toward retirement age, and even a little past when I could retire, I thought, hey, why not try get in there and write something where you can
Yeah.
get a message to the world? And
Yeah.
I feel like there's, a lot of messages that we have to share with the world before we leave this earth. And so I kind of felt really strongly about that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to write more. This is just the
Great.
beginning.
All right, wonderful. I was listening to some audio, a little speech you were giving, and you talked a little bit about working in your legal background into the book. And there's a little story, and you can expand on this. Where the main character Corday is only one quarter Native American. Tell us that. kind of how you worked that in and what the, inspiration for that was.
Well, I wanted to include legal issues in my book that a lot of people don't know about. And I thought, I've just got to put this in there. It really meant a lot to me. And so, Cordy being one quarter, I had her interviewed by the LA Times. And the reporter says, well, you're only one quarter. How can you claim you're Native American? And she said, well, I'm enrolled. And also, she said, may I take you back in time to the Plessy v. Ferguson case, which was from the late 1800s, decided by the Supreme Court, I might add, where a man was 7/8 white and 1/8 black, and he got on a boxcar and he was thrown off because he was black, and he filed and appealed all the way to the Supreme Court and said, "I'm 7/8 white," and they said, no matter how little African
Right.
American, and that time they called it Negro, that you have, you are considered to be African and Black, Negro at that time. And I thought, what a dichotomy. It's so amazing how, depending on what's going on, people are either from a group or they're not. And I thought, I've just got to bring this up to
Yeah.
get people thinking about that.
I thought that was really interesting. You used the term enrolled just a second ago, and I know in your bio it says you're an enrolled member of Minnesota Chippewa tribe. What does that mean exactly? Enrolled.
Well, what it means is that a lot of people say I'm a descendant, and that means maybe somebody in the family was native, with the 23andMe and the DNA thing
Yeah.
going on now. A lot of people are like, hey, I'm native, and
Right.
they can find something. Well, with the enrolled, they have to lineally tie you to your tribe. And
Okay.
so each tribe is allowed to determine its enrollment based upon its own rules. So some tribes require a strict quarter or you're not enrolled. Some tribes, you just have to be a lineal descendant of the tribe, like a child
Okay.
of a member, and they'll do DNA testing to make sure you are that tribal member's child. So it's incredible how different it is depending on what tribe you're from. But
Yeah.
enrolled is sort of a different pedigree from saying I'm a descendant. Then you
Yeah.
truly are tied to
Okay.
the original government role.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Um, you mentioned that during this late '70s through the mid '80s, um, this new awareness and support for Native Americans, and you mentioned that you hope some of that enthusiasm will come back. What is kind of and I understand obviously there's so many different tribes and different situations on different reservations and people that don't live on the reservations. But is there a general feel on Indian reservations or from the population? Um, how do they feel currently as far, it's easy for these things, like you said, to be brought into the forefront and then kind of disappear and everyone think, oh, well, it's handled. The native, everything's fine. What's kind of the current just mindset of a lot of people, a lot of the Native Americans that you were working with in your law practice?
Well, what's really sad, and a lot of people don't realize this, but they'll think tribes are rich, and there's so many tribes that are not,
Yeah.
depending. And so there's a huge dichotomy between a very wealthy tribe, very poor tribe. And so there are people I would run into, this is shocking, living on 500 a month and
Yeah.
not knowing how they were going to make it, and then having to go for commodities or food, and having an old beater that barely ran. And so there really is poverty out there, and people don't realize, they think, oh, everybody's doing fine. It's not true. There are people who can't, get medical care, that sort of thing. And we have one of the lowest mortality, highest mortality rates in the country for any ethnic group, which is
Hmm.
really sad. And an elder at like during that period was 45 years old because, an average lifespan was like a third world country, and it's starting to come down again. And so I think that a lot of people would like to see, some economic growth out on some of these really isolated areas where there's no jobs, there's nothing. And I mean, I know some places have a lot of wind, and I've thought about that. Maybe they could do alternative energies. So
Yeah.
it's, there's a lot that needs to be done. And I know that's true for the whole country right now, too. I mean, a lot of people are really, I feel that way about the whole country. I just want to
Sure,
see us
sure.
all do better.
Right, right, absolutely. In back in the, you know, 70s and 80s, or I guess it would have been the 70s, AIM, did they want to be separate from the United States again? Was that the plan?
No, I think what their plan was they wanted to help support different tribes that were having problems. And so they would call, and I'll give you an example, the fishing rights. They would say, like, they're taking away our fish. Can you guys come out and kind of get involved in some political activities? And they would say, yes, we'll do that. And they
Mm.
would come out and help march and organize, but not to separate from the country, but to bring awareness to some of the different things that were going on. And I sort of think like the murdered and missing Indigenous women thing is
Yeah.
sort of a modern day take
Yes.
on that, with a lot of people fighting for that. And it's sort of shocking because you didn't realize, I did, but a lot of people didn't, that there were so many people missing.
Yeah.
Because on reservations, some of them are millions of acres and they'd have maybe two patrol officers on duty.
Right.
Can
Right.
you
Right.
imagine that? And so, really shocking. There were people that just disappeared and nobody could find them. And they'd be way out in the woods. Maybe they'd find them, years later. And with the lack of basically support for police enforcement, a lot of, imagine it's like the wild, it's very wild. You've got to take care of yourself because you call and maybe 5 hours later, the one officer doing millions of acres shows up.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a pretty scary thing when you think about that. You've got
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
kind of take care of yourself in some of these areas.
Yeah. And I think that issue, I mean, this is one of those times where, like, a Hollywood movie or something can bring awareness to something because the movie Wind River, I thought, did a great job of kind of tying in, how many Native American young girls were going missing, every year,
I
and that was
absolutely
something
loved
that
it.
I thought, I mean, I might have passively known about some of those things, but it really kind of made you think about it much, much more, and it just, yeah, I don't see that on the news, I don't see that being brought forward as, and that is kind of always the case that some of the marginalized communities, those things just happen and it's like, we don't even know about it.
Is that incredible? And I've got to admit, I've loved Wind River and I love the way they showed some of the isolated houses out there and what
Yeah.
people are going through. And some of the areas truly are, that way. When I've
Yeah.
traveled to some of the isolated reservations visiting, people are, way out in the middle of nowhere, not having, yards and not having enough food. And it's
It,
absolutely horrifying.
and it's not just, it's something I think a lot of people in America maybe aren't aware of, that there are not just on the Indian reservations, there are parts of, some of the Appalachians and areas, like there are places where there is no electricity, let alone internet. I mean, do you think about that in the United States in 2025? It's
Exactly. I
crazy.
thought about, so I saw Loretta Lynn and I was so happy. I got to see her before she
Yeah.
passed away at one of the tribal casinos
Oh,
performing.
yeah.
It was wonderful. But one of the things she said that really struck me, she said, and back where she was from, way out in the mountain country with the miners, you couldn't get coffee, sugar. It was a big deal to have like a big vat of coffee,
Yeah.
sugar, some milk. And to us, we just take it for granted in the city. We're always going to have that. But think about when you can't get that and you're wondering how you're going to make it. I mean, I
Yeah.
just feel like we've got to start taking care of our whole country, and
Yeah.
those isolated individuals. So I
Absolutely.
completely agree with you. Yes. And I tried to
Wonderful.
bring some of that forward in the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll see as you go along and read it, I do a contrast with rural and urban just to show some of the differences and things that are going on. And that was really important to me to show
Yeah.
the contrast.
I will be leaving I'm going to Sedona for a vacation tomorrow morning. So I'll be gone for a week and just sitting at the condo out there with my mom. And I'll have a lot of good time to read it. I'm going to pass the book over to my mom when I'm done because I know she will also really love it. Antoinette, to me, this was a really fun chat, and I find this subject matter very, very, very interesting. So I really appreciate your time. And, like I said, I always try to be honest. Sometimes I get somebody on the show, an author, and I've just started reading the book or I haven't even started it yet, and I always want to be honest with people. But, the bits, the first couple chapters that I have gotten through, it's a great read. it gets moving real quickly, and just the descriptions are great. It sucks you right in. You're right there in the in the time frame real quickly, and I just highly recommend for people to come on out to the 29 Palms Book Festival and have a chat with you on November 7th, 11 a.m. And that event is put on by Desert General Patrick and Francoise over there. But the event will be held down at Freedom Plaza in downtown 29 Palms. And I will be out there that weekend. So I look forward to meeting you in
Can't
person.
wait to meet you. And I want to
Thank
thank you so much for inviting me. And it's so exciting because you really sound like you know California inside and out, a real
trying.
expert. And it's quite an honor to know that you've enjoyed, what you've read so far. I love that. And I really can't wait. And I hope you read it. And I can't wait to hear what you think once you get
Sounds
through it
great.
all.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for inviting me so much.
My
It was
pleasure.
really fun. And I really enjoyed talking to you. Thanks. Hope to see you.
I
And
will
have
see
a
you soon.
wonderful vacation, by the way.
Thank you.
And Sedona's a great place.
Yeah,
Enjoy
beautiful.
yourself. All right. Well, thank